I am Ubik. Before the universe was I am. I made the suns. I made the worlds. I created the lives and the places they inhabit. I move them here. I put them there. They go as I say. They do as I tell them. I am the word, and my name is never spoken, the name which no one knows. I am called Ubik, but that is not my name. I am. I shall always be. All I know today that I didn't know when I wrote Ubik is that Ubik isn't fiction. Philip K. Dick. Hello, fellow lovers of the liminal and weird, and welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. Today I am excited to do a plot-spoiling deep read of Philip K. Dick's book, Ubik. If you are just looking for a review or a recommendation for this book, I did do a quick review a couple of days back on the channel, so you'll be able to find that video just a few back from this one. If you have already read this and are looking for some plot-spoiling detailed conversation on it, or if you don't mind plot spoilers, then this is the video for you. I opened the video with a quote about Ubik that is written here on the back of the book, on the back of the aerosol can here. That is what I read at the beginning. And that is also the Ubik advertisement that's at the head of the last chapter. Each chapter in this book has a Ubik advertisement before it. And that is the last one of the book when Ubik suddenly starts to take on religious connotations. I also read a quote from Philip K. Dick that he stated in an interview that he didn't feel that Ubik was 100% fiction, and we'll get into that at the end of the video. But for now, let's dive into the novel Ubik. So as I said, every chapter begins with a little advertisement for Ubik. The one for the first chapter is, "Friends, this is cleanup time and we're discounting all our silent electric Ubiks by this much money. Yes, we're throwing away the blue book, and remember, every Ubik on our lot has been used only as directed." And you'll see that happening through every one of the chapters in this book, that they give a little advertisement for Ubik at the beginning of them. All right, the novel opens with Glenn Runciter. His name might be pronounced Runciter or Runciter. I don't know. I'm going to call him Runciter because I only read it, and that's how I read it. And he is the head of Runciter and Associates of New York, which is a company that does anti-telepathy. And the novel opens with the strongest telepath in the world disappearing, and this telepath worked for the kind of nemesis company to Runciter's company, which is run by Raymond Hollis. And Raymond Hollis runs a company that's illegal, where he uses telepaths to steal information. So Runciter's company is made up of people that have talents in suppressing telepathy. So you have people that are born with telepathy, and you have people that are born with the ability to stop people from using telepathy. So he hires the people that stop people from using telepathy. So clients will hire him when they're afraid that a company is trying to steal their secrets in order to make sure that their telepaths don't work. Really wild setup. Very interesting setup. Anyway, the top telepath has disappeared, and that is S. Dole Melopone, which you don't have to remember. He never makes an appearance in this novel that I know of. And Runciter is not 100% confident in his ability to run this company. He feels like that he ran it better when he ran it with his wife, Ella Runciter, who has unfortunately passed away, and he feels like the company has been going downhill since she passed away. But Ella Runciter is living what is called half-life, and that is a new invention for this society, where when somebody dies, if you get them quickly to a half-life center, they're put in this kind of hibernation state that they can stay in for quite a few years, and the person can come and speak to them through a little bit of telepathy. They put a thing in their ear and where they can hear the thoughts of their deceased. But they can only do this for a couple of minutes a year. And the reason that they only want to do it a couple of minutes a year is because every time they take them out of the cryo-freezing in order to do this weird telepathic speaking, it cuts down the time that they can be kept in half-life. So he decides that he has to go speak to his wife and partner that helped him create this company in order to be able to understand what to do next. So he goes and they pull out her body from cryo, and he starts talking to her. And right away, we realize that he is super worried about the company, and she is more interested in talking about her time in half-life. She almost seems to not really care about or understand what's going on with the company. And I'm going to read a quote here, just because I find this half-life concept really interesting. And I think Dick tackles it in a really interesting way. So this is Ella Runciter speaking. "I was dreaming," Ella said. "I saw a smoky red light, a horrible light, and yet I kept moving toward it. I couldn't stop." "Yeah," Runciter said, nodding. "The Bardo Thodol, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, tells about that. You remember reading that? The doctors made you read it when you were," he hesitated, "dying," he said then. "The smoky red light is bad, isn't it?" Ella said. "Yeah, you want to avoid it." So he pulls her out of this cryo state about once a year and speaks to her about 5 minutes. And all that time that she spends there, to her, seems like she's dreaming. I find that just that little bit she said there, and I probably pronounced what he called the red light wrong. I apologize for that, from the Tibetan Book of the Dead. But nobody really knows what they experience in between those little 5-minute conversations that happen once a year. And this was really interesting to me. The world that could be laid out in this half-life. What would that existence look like for the people that were in that state? Anyway, he keeps trying to ask her about what he should do about the disappearance of this incredibly psychic individual, and she doesn't really know. And suddenly she disappears, and a man starts talking in his brain instead of his wife. And he introduces him and says, "My name is Jory." And of course Runciter's like, "This is what is going on? I'm here to talk to my wife. I paid for this. Who are you? Get off this line." And Jory says, "Nobody ever comes and talks to me, and I would like to talk to you for a minute." And Jory starts asking him questions about what has been going on in the world. Eventually, Runciter gets tired of Jory and takes out the headphone in his ear and goes and complains to the management about the fact that his wife was interrupted. The person he's complaining to, the owner of the mortuary, says that the person's name is Jory Miller, and that he is next to his wife that his body is next to his wife's. And he describes it like 2 AM radio stations, one taking over the airwaves of another. So unfortunately, Runciter leaves without getting any information that he wanted to get from his deceased wife. And then after that, we change narrative voices, and we are with Joe Chip, who is going to be our protagonist throughout the rest of this novel. And Joe Chip lives in a kind of messy apartment, and we are introduced to him through the concept that he has a visitor named Gigi Ashwood, who is bringing him a possible anti-telepath, which is, Gigi Ashwood is kind of this scout. He doesn't really work for the Runciter Corporation. He's just kind of a scout that looks for talented people and then brings them to Joe Chip. And Joe Chip is able to test them, see if they are skilled enough or how high their skills are, and whether they'd be a good fit to take to Runciter. And Gigi Ashwood claims that he has somebody that is absolutely mind-blowing, and they're speaking through an intercom, and Gigi Ashwood's like, just let me come up and introduce you to this person. She's incredible. And eventually he decides he's going to let them into his apartment so he can meet this incredible anti-telepath. And this is where probably, in my opinion, the most famous part of the book, and really one of the best, comes in. And that is, of course, the fact that he has to pay his door 5 cents in order to open or close it. And the back and forth that occurs here shows Dick's humor really well. And I talk about this a lot in the review that I did for the book, so I'm not going to say it all again here. But anyway, it ends up with the door threatening to sue him. It's really a great satirical view of a kind of capitalistic future gone totally awry. It was really, really funny, and that voice kind of keeps up through this entire book. So he meets this anti-telepath that Gigi Ashwood has found, and her name is Patricia Conley. She goes by Pat. And her parents work for Raymond Hollis's company, which of course is the company that is fighting against the company that Joe Chip works for, that Runciter runs. So they don't even realize that she is a anti-telepath. And when he asked Gigi Ashwood about her powers are that she can go back in time and change things, which makes her the ultimate anti-telepath in that she can go back and to the precog, or the telepathic, all that it looks like is they can see the one possible future, so she can change it in the past, so they'll think they always saw the same future. She really is kind of a atomic bomb of powers. It's absolutely incredible what she can do. But Joe Chip, his intuition tells him that she's not great. He doesn't really like her. In fact, he's afraid that she might be there to mess with them because her parents work for the other company. There's a quote I'm going to read. It's on page 25, just about what her powers are. "She goes back in time," Gigi Ashwood said. Joe stared at him. "Back in time," Gigi repeated, savoring this. His eyes shot shafts of significance to every part of Joe Chip's kitchen. "The precog affected by her still sees one predominant future, like you said, the one luminous possibility, and he chooses it, and he's right. But why is it right? Why is it luminous? Because the girl," he shrugged in her direction, "Pat controls the future. That one luminous possibility is luminous because she's gone into the past and changed it. By changing it, she changes the present, which includes the precog. He's affected without knowing it, and his talent seems to work, whereas it really doesn't. So that is one advantage of her anti-talent over other anti-precog talents. The other and the greater is that she can cancel out the precog's decision after he's made it." So that's Pat, and she's an important character throughout this. I'm going to move kind of quickly through the plot points here. This book is absolutely worth a read, and I don't want you to think that this video will work in lieu of reading it, because I'm going to skip past stuff that occurs that's very interesting, but that doesn't really feed into my overall deep reading of the text, because all of it's leading up to a certain twist, a turnaround that is very important, but everything leading up to that twist isn't completely important. So Runciter is offered a job by kind of the Elon Musk of this era, one of the richest men around. And he's a little bit nervous about taking it just because of the disappearance of that really strong psychic individual. But the man offers him a ton of money. So he has to put together his best team, and he comes up with 11 people, and they all meet to discuss this job. And this section kind of feels almost like a comic book. They're like a superhero team. It's a little bit X-Men. Each of them have their own specific powers. And right before this, Joe introduces Runciter to Pat. And Pat demonstrates her powers, which blows Runciter's mind because, of course, that means she can do anything, basically. She can go back in time and do almost anything. So she's really kind of a terrifying person when you get right down to it. And Joe Chip actually tells him that he really shouldn't trust this woman. So right away his intuition's kind of saying don't trust her, but they put her on the team. So these 11 anti-psychic people. So this crew goes up to the moon, and right away a bomb goes off. It turns out that this was a trap. And in this bombing, Runciter is killed. And they get him on the spaceship, and they're getting away, and they have to figure out what to do, and they decide to take him down to Earth and get him put into half-life, which unfortunately they failed to get him down there in time, and they have to bury him, and they decide to have his funeral. But while this is going on, things start to get weird, and this is the most Dickian part of this novel, where all of a sudden, like, cigarettes seem stale, and suddenly his pack of cigarettes is replaced by an older pack, and coffee tastes really bad to him. And then Joe Chip pulls money out of his pocket at one point, and he looks at the money, and it has Runciter's head on it. Now, Runciter was an important person, but never important enough to have his head on money. So reality is changing around him. And of course, one of the first things that he thinks is that Patricia is the reason for this, that somehow she's going back and changing the past. And that's kind of what I thought as well. And slowly, everything starts to devolve. It starts to go back in time. And his car turns into a Model A, and he gets a drug called Ubik. And he doesn't know exactly what it is, but every time the world devolves into an earlier time, the Ubik medicine changes as well. And eventually he trades away the Ubik to get a ride to the funeral. None of that is absolutely important. What is important is that he keeps getting messages from Runciter, whether they're written on bathroom walls or they come from the TV. He keeps getting messages from Runciter until we eventually realize that it was actually all of them that died, and Runciter was the only one that lived, and they are all in half-life, and he's trying to get a hold of them. This part was slightly disappointing to me, and I talked about it a little bit in the review. A trope that I have a really hard time with in science fiction, and this is just me personally, this is just my preference. It doesn't say anything bad about this trope or people that write in this trope. A trope that I dislike in science fiction is going into the past, because to me that seems almost anti-science fiction. The whole point of science fiction is to, in my opinion, look at the future and look at technology in the future. So going into the past seems just the opposite of what I want to do in science fiction. I really don't find it especially interesting. And that was compounded by the fact that when they first introduced this concept of half-life, and she was talking about this red light, the possibilities of what this half-life world could look like were incredible. The amount of artistic freedom that would give a writer to be as weird and metaphorical as they wanted to be. I feel like just choosing 1939 as the way that Half-Life is going to look really didn't didn't do it for me. I felt like it could have been a lot more. I was still interested, and it's still Philip K. Dick, and it kicks ass all the way through. But that one aspect of it was a little hard on me. I didn't enjoy that as much. In fact, I kind of was not audibly. I was absolutely let down when I realized that was what the Half-Life was going to look like. And we do get into some weird stuff. There's stuff that's melting between times. It gets really interesting, but not as interesting as I feel like it absolutely could have been. So people slowly start to devolve. Of course, time is running backwards, and people melt away is the only way I can describe it. And at this point, Joe Chip is still blaming Pat for all of this, because of course it's dealing with going back in time, which is Pat's power. And it comes to a point where it seems like she kind of admits that it's her, but in reality, she's just really a kind of a strange person, but she's watching him devolve and trying to, I think, go down these stairs to get to the rest of the crew to try to save them. But he's devolving, and it's some of Dick's best writing. This passage of him trying to get down the stairs while his body's falling apart. Absolutely incredible. Really well written. And it turns out that it really wasn't Pat. It was actually Jory Miller all along. So this person, Jory Miller, that I brought up earlier that interrupted his call, has taken over the Half-Life world. And he is eating other people in Half-Life in order to continue his Half-Life on indefinitely. And the only way to save themselves is through a drug, a product, we'll say. A product called, not a drug, a product called Ubik. And another interesting thing about this novel is that Ubik is in front of every chapter. The cover is iconic with this spray can. This is by Peter Roche, is the artist that did this spray can for the cover. The concept of Ubik being called Ubik is great because I think it's short for ubiquitous, which means that it's so prevalent that it's everywhere. Let me make sure that's true. Yeah, present, appearing, or found everywhere. Yeah, that it's just a part of everything. It's so ubiquitous. It's Ubik, but it's very rare, and it doesn't show up in this book until like halfway through it, which was strange. The whole time I was reading, I was like, where's Ubik? I thought this was going to be a crazy story about this product called Ubik, and it doesn't show up. And when it does show up, what it does is it stops them from devolving. It allows them to continue to exist in Half-Life. And at times it brings them back to their specific time, even though Jory's trying to keep it at the date that he wants to keep it at. So when I finished it, I was a bit let down because Ubik wasn't really a mind-altering drug. Half-Life wasn't really a mind-altering place. It was just a place that somebody had taken over and made a specific time. But by definition, all this is mind-altering. But I had to sit and think about what Philip K. Dick was really kind of getting at. And that made me appreciate this novel so much more. So I'm not sure if Ella invented Ubik. It kind of hints at that. But she helps him get Ubik. She says he's won a free lifetime supply, and she ends up in the Half-Life world. She's the one fighting Jory, not wanting Jory to take over everything. So she really kind of pins all her hopes on Joe Chip and gives him Ubik. And he's able to call a pharmacist from his future to give him Ubik whenever he needs it. And that's kind of how the novel closes. And before I get into the real philosophy of it, I just got to go over the little kind of twist ending. And I've read some reviews where people have said this is kind of just a Friday the 13th style ending that doesn't really make a lot of sense. People seem kind of split on this ending. So we go to the real world where Runciter is still alive, and he goes to speak with his wife at the mortuary, and he tries to tip somebody, and he gives them a coin, and the coin, the person that's getting the tip is confused because it's not a currency he's used to, and Runciter looks at the coin and it's got Joe Chip's face on it. And then he says he's sure that if he looked in his wallet, he'd see a lot more money that had Joe Chip's face on it, even though Joe Chip's face has never been on money. But he says this is probably just the beginning. So we get this weird sense that Runciter is in Half-Life because the same thing's happening to him. And then we question, like, are Joe and everybody still alive? It just nulls the entire novel. We don't know what's what anymore. And that, it honestly didn't bother me that much. I don't mind going, oh, you know, maybe they're all in there. And Runciter just didn't start till later. That kind of ending doesn't bother me, but I can understand why it did bother a lot of people, because it can make it so that you wonder if everything that happened kind of happened for an actual reason. So yeah, it's kind of a crazy ending to the plot, and I couldn't really find a way into it when it was over, even though I tried. But with a lot of thought, I kind of started, well, honestly, when I picked up and read the back cover again, it opened up kind of a new concept, and it's one that Dick is really interested in, and that is the idea of a deity and religion. And the way that this quote on the back of the book is written makes Ubik sound like a god, and it makes Ubik sound like it offers salvation, which it does. It allows you to continue to be alive in limbo, in half-life. And in that sense, a new concept opens up in the novel. The concept of Ubik being a savior in a can, which is super interesting because it loops back around to the idea of capitalism that has been explored throughout this entire book. And I don't even want to call it capitalism, it's consumer culture. It looks at consumer culture gone to its furthest reaches. So much so that even salvation comes in an aerosol spray can. And I think that is the final punchline of a book that I think is a satire and kind of a comedy written by Philip K. Dick. And I really liked it when I looked at it through that lens. It made a lot more sense to me. Philip K. Dick, I quoted at the very beginning, said that the interesting thing about Ubik that I learned is that Ubik is not fiction. That is an interesting quote. Philip K. Dick, as he went through life, had experiences that he felt made him realize that life was not 100% what it seems. And he decided that all of us are living in kind of a half-life, that this reality is a half-life, that we are, I don't want to say in the Matrix type of stuff, but slightly similar to that there's something more going on, and that this perception is not true perception, that we're in kind of a half-life looking at everything. And I found that very interesting. You could fall down a rabbit hole of Dick's philosophical beliefs. They were quite wild. But yeah, I think that this is one that he really connected that idea with. So yeah, so that was Ubik. I enjoyed it. It's not my favorite Dick novel, but I really do understand why it is many people's favorites. The only thing keeping it off my favorite list is, once again, I feel like of all the things he could have done with the weird world of Half-Life, making it 1939 was the least interesting thing, in my opinion. And that's just, like I said, taste. It has nothing to do with Dick's choice. It's a fine choice. It's just not my favorite. And the fact that the book is a humorous statement in many ways, instead of the kind of deepness of the statement that you find in stuff like Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep and The Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch, which are my two favorite Dick books. This is probably third. Yeah, so that's my take on the book. If you watched this video to the end, thank you very much. If you liked it, please click like. And if you like this kind of content, please subscribe. We'll be making a lot more of it in the future, and we'll be making a lot more on Philip K. Dick. All right, thank you so much for watching.